Mazdel Cave Incident, June 24, 1967. There were 10 explorers preparing to enter Mazdel Cave to clean some deep passages and map them. The team leader had explored the cave before, which reassured the others. This cave is known for its narrow passages and the scarcity of places where one can stand fully upright. After hours inside the cave, 4 explorers realized how difficult the situation was and decided to return to the surface. They noticed the sky was overcast, but there was nothing alarming. The remaining group continued descending until they reached a narrow passage called Marathon, 45 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters high, with a small water stream. Everything was going well until it started raining. At first, the rain was not concerning, but the water began rising inside the cave in a frightening way. The explorers justified stopping their work and heading back to exit, even though they were 3 hours away from the entrance. Outside, the surface team saw a lake forming at the cave entrance. Those inside had no idea how much water would flood them. The surface team went to seek help. Inside, the explorers were trying to reach higher chambers, but the water kept rising until it reached their faces. Rescue teams and volunteers tried pumping water out and sending oxygen inside in hopes that someone might still be alive, but unfortunately, all the trapped explorers drowned. The Shaft Pit Tragedy, May 1973. 9 professional divers planned to dive in the shaft pit at Mount Jamber. This pit was distinguished by a small opening leading to an underground lake at a depth of 6 meters. A beam of light penetrated this opening into the cave and was used as a visual guide. Everyone agreed not to exceed a depth of 60 meters to remain in the main chamber and see the light. However, on the second day, 4 divers decided to go to the western part of the cave at a depth of 75 meters, more than planned. This was extremely dangerous, especially since they were using regular air tanks instead of mixed gases. The deeper they went, the higher the risk of nitrogen narcosis, a condition that causes loss of focus and behavior similar to being intoxicated. They began descending. One diver felt the effects of nitrogen and immediately went up, followed by some others, but 4 continued downward. From the surface, concern grew when it was noticed that the divers were late, so a search dive was initiated. A lamp and a camera were found at the bottom, but no sign of the divers. Here the problem became clear: accumulated sand. The divers' movements stirred up clouds of sand, completely blocking visibility. The result: without vision, with low oxygen, and under the effect of nitrogen, the 4 drowned. Jacob's Well Tragedy, November 3, 1983. 2 students from the University of Texas, Richard and Clark, decided to enter Jacob's Well, a water opening leading to an underground cave. It appears shallow, about 8 meters, but in reality, it contains 3 underwater chambers. The first and second are easy, but the third requires passing through a very narrow opening. Whoever passes enters a chamber 3 meters long with a very small opening inside that cannot be passed. 2 years earlier, 2 people died there after the exit was blocked by a rock collapse. Returning to Richard and Clark, the students were not professional cave divers and were training to obtain a diving license. Their instructor, Don, personally recovered the bodies of previous victims and always warned about this place, even sealing the opening with cement. But other divers reopened it and wrote next to it, "You can't stop us, Don." He himself nearly died there when he tried to enter the 4th chamber, but a gravel collapse trapped him inside the tunnel. He nearly gave up and died after his oxygen tank emptied and he swallowed some water. But at that moment, his survival instinct kicked in. He moved quickly and managed to displace enough gravel to escape. When he got out, he saw his diving partner extending a regulator for him to breathe from. As he began ascending to the surface, the air inside his body expanded until it became about 4 times its normal size. When he broke the surface, he was screaming in pain, his stomach massively swollen after his stomach had completely ruptured. This story inspired Richard and Clark to enter the well. In the 3rd chamber, they located the small opening, so Richard removed his oxygen tank to pass through and began entering while holding it in his hand. When Clark removed his tank and tried to enter, he saw Richard's face and noticed he no longer had the tank with him and was suffocating quickly. Clark handed him the regulator, allowing him to breathe again. Then they began taking turns using the regulator while making their way out. Somehow, they managed to pass the extremely tight restriction in the third chamber. After that, they started heading toward the exit until they heard a terrifying sound that caught their attention. The sound of an oxygen tank hitting a wall. This was not only an indication that they had hit the wall and were heading in the wrong direction, but also a sign that the tank was running out. They realized they had entered the wrong chimney in the first chamber, a tunnel that appears to lead to the surface but is actually a dead end. Clark managed to swim back to the surface, gasping for air after covering an 546, incredible distance of 75 feet in a single breath. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Richard, who stayed behind and drowned. When Clark called the police for help, Don, the instructor himself, showed up and was shocked to see his students there. Gollum Cave, August 8, 2005. A group of 5 friends decided to enter Gollum Cave, also known as the Cave of Death, due to its danger. They arrived at the entrance at 3 a.m., and one friend decided to wait outside while the others entered. They faced their first problem when entering, as they had to crawl through a small pool of water. After that, they reached a fork leading left and right and chose to go left, which led them to another small pool. This seemingly harmless pool actually led to another section of the cave through an underwater tunnel. The tunnel was narrow, only about 3 to 4 feet in diameter, and to pass through it, one had to dive completely underwater, meaning only one person could enter at a time and had to swim about 15 feet. They began diving one after another into the pool to reach the other side of the cave. Once they arrived, they discovered a section with about 3 feet of air above the water. Meanwhile, the person who stayed outside could not hear any sound or 709 see any light coming from inside the cave. After a while, he became worried and entered the cave himself, but he heard nothing and saw no light. Unsure what to do, he first called some friends experienced in caving, then called the police. He could not imagine what was happening inside. The 4 friends who entered likely realized that the air in the area they reached was not breathable, what is known in caving as bad air, meaning air that does not contain a natural balance of gases. In other words, high carbon dioxide and low oxygen. This type of air reduces a person's ability to think, move, and breathe normally, making returning through that narrow tunnel extremely dangerous. They tried to exit one after another, but the first person who dove underwater could not find the exit before running out of breath. This happened due to the effect of elevated carbon dioxide on the ability to hold breath and think clearly. After 30 to 60 seconds, the second person entered and found the first, and so on, until they all became trapped inside the tunnel. The police arrived and attempted to pump oxygen and remove water, while families and friends waited anxiously outside the cave. Unfortunately, all attempts failed. Later, the bodies were recovered and the cave was permanently sealed with cement.